Every year, rats ate $2 billion of Pablo Escobar's cash. They didn't steal it, they chewed it, turning crisp $100 bills into shredded nesting material in the dark. The richest criminal who ever lived could buy a country. He could not keep the rodents out of his own fortune. So where did the rest of it go? The man losing fortunes to vermin was no careless amateur. He bribed presidents and judges. He kept a private army on his payroll. He once built his own prison and walked out of it the moment the arrangement stopped suiting him. Power on that scale runs on cash, and cash, at his level, behaved less like money than like a rising flood. At its peak, the Medellin operation pulled in roughly $420 million every week, $60 million a day. All of it physical paper, moving through suitcases and welded car compartments faster than any bank on earth could have processed it, and no bank would have dared try. It could not be wired, it could not be deposited. It could only be stacked, and it piled up faster than human hands could keep pace. Counting machines burned out under the strain and were abandoned. At a certain point, they stopped counting the cash and started weighing it, the way grain is weighed by the ton. The bills came loose and unsorted, and holding them together swallowed rubber bands by the crate. So many that the organization spent around $2,500 every single month on rubber bands alone. Not weapons, not bribes. Rubber bands. An ordinary family's monthly wage gone to the dull mechanical task of stopping the bundles from bursting apart. This was the threshold almost no fortune in history had ever crossed. The point where money stops being counted and starts being hauled. You cannot lock a flood inside a vault. No vault is large enough, and a vault that large could never stay hidden. So the money went into the ground, into the walls, into the hollow bones of ordinary buildings. Cash was sealed behind the plaster of quiet suburban homes, the kind no investigator would look at twice. It was buried beneath the floorboards of farmhouses in the Colombian hills, in plain fields that gave away nothing from the road. It was lowered into pits, into chambers carved out under barns, wrapped in plastic and let down into the soil like coffins into a grave. Some was packed into ceilings, some sat behind false walls in city apartments. Some was sealed in steel drums and sunk to the beds of rivers and lakes. The hiding places multiplied past anything a single mind could hold, until the locations became a secret no one fully possessed. A map of it all, had one ever existed, would have filled a wall and gone out of date within a week. Investigators would eventually tie hundreds of separate properties to the operation and still close their files with enormous sums simply unaccounted for. Much of it was hidden by men who were soon dead, jailed, or unable to recall afterward which field, which wall, which stretch of muddy riverbank. People still believe untold amounts lie down there today, somewhere in Colombia, waiting in the dark for owners who are never coming back. The earth was trusted to keep faith. The earth keeps nothing. Soil is not a safe. Soil is alive. Underground, the true enemy was never a rival or a thief. It was water. Damp earth pushes against buried cash and works its way through plastic, through paper, into the core of every bundle. Within months, the outer bills swell, soften, and fuse into solid, worthless bricks. Fungus spreads across them in creeping maps of green and gray. The ink holds, but the fabric the notes are printed on, part cotton, part linen, simply rots the way any cloth abandoned in the ground rots. The men sent to dig up a stash learned to expect loss the way farmers expect spoilage, opening a fortune to find a share of it already collapsed into mush, value sinking quietly back into the earth that swallowed it. And still, the rot was never the real disaster. The real disaster was the sheer mass. A man with a few $1,000,000 has problems an accountant can solve in an afternoon. A man drowning in billions of untraceable paper has a problem with no solution anywhere. Money that cannot enter a bank cannot grow. Money that cannot be explained cannot be spent in daylight. Money arriving faster than it can even be tallied stops being a fortune and turns into an endless chore, guarded, moved, dried, and replaced as fast as it spoils. A shipment that took an hour to unload could take days to bury safely, and another was always already on the road. Even handing out $1,000,000 a day, he could not have emptied his own holdings inside a single lifetime. The cash had outgrown its own purpose. It no longer served the man. The man now served it, every waking hour with no horizon in sight. What is anyone supposed to do with a thing that can neither be kept nor let go? By the end, the empire was already gone. Pablo Escobar was a hunted man, slipping between safe houses in the dark, his own government and his former allies all tightening the circle, his family crowded with him into rooms they did not dare to heat. One freezing night, his small daughter lay ill and shaking with cold, and there was no safe way to warm her. A lit stove might be seen, a gathered sound might be heard. Every ordinary comfort had become a risk that might get every one of them killed. So he reached for the only thing he still owned without limit. He began burning money, feeding $2,000,000 in cash into the fire by hand, note after note, for a little heat and a little light to see his daughter's face. He fed it in slowly, the way anyone tends a fire, watching what could have funded a hospital reduce itself to ash for a few degrees of warmth. The bills that armies had killed over became, in that small room, nothing more than fuel. No one in that room spoke about what the fire was actually made of. A sum that could have built a hospital warmed one sick child for one night and was gone as smoke. How does a fortune this vast end up worth less than a bundle of dry firewood? If enough money can quietly become the heaviest, most useless thing a person owns, then what is it, really, that any of us are spending our lives trying to build? Every fortune ever built comes with a bill attached, and that bill always comes due. Usually long after the man who ran it up has stopped watching for it. History is crowded with them, and we are only just beginning. Subscribe to Golden Ruin and tell us in the comments, was this man ever truly rich, or just the most heavily guarded poor soul who ever lived?